So last Sunday, the day that he and his brother were scheduled to come to me for the week, my son Eitan learned that his good friend was sick with COVID. The same good friend Eitan had shared lunch with indoors every day that week. Thank God, his friend had only mild symptoms. But Felicia and I agreed that Eitan should get tested and the boys should stay at her house and quarantine for a few days until their PCR test results came back. Then it turned out that the mom of one of the friends who slept over the Saturday night before that also was sick. So they all stood online to be tested late Monday and spent the week waiting for results. We were all relieved to learn last night that they're all negative, especially because at this point, almost everyone we know has someone COVID positive in their home or among their friends. And this scene was playing out in homes all around Park Slope and all around New York City this week, as the positive test curve was no longer curvilinear, but directly vertical. As you know, the positivity rate over the last 14 days is up 437%. What was perhaps most disturbing to me was how readily Eitan consented to quarantine. He's 16 years old and likes nothing more than time with his friends. But he has spent 2 of his most formative years largely holed up in a small apartment, hiding from the danger of COVID. While the relief of stretching his wings this fall has been immense, and the company of other teens relished by him such that school is something he actually looks forward to, and the freedom on the weekends to roam the town with peers is joyful for him, the old experience of quarantine is familiar enough that he can easily slip right back into it. Over the last 2 years, he has known more days inside than out. I also became aware this week that I am just as afraid now of getting COVID as I maybe ever have been. It's true that I have an autoimmune disease, but this doesn't make sense. I am vaccinated and I am boosted, and I'm safer than I've ever been, even with Omicron, as are most of us. But we've gone so long avoiding COVID. We've gotten good at hiding in our homes when necessary, at least I have, and taking all manner of precautions. I found this week that I would rather hide, quarantine even, than take the risk of what is likely to be a non-life-threatening illness. I wonder how many of you can relate to this. So perhaps that's why when reading this week's Parsha, my eyes lingered on Exodus chapter 2, verse 2. The moment when the woman we will come to know as Yochevet hides in her house with her newborn son. Vatahar ha'isha vatiled ben, v'tere oto kitov hu, v'titz pnehu, shlosha yirachim. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw how beautiful or how good he was, she hid him for 3 months. I imagined Yochevet curled up with her new baby, using the walls of her house as a shield to protect his little life. I imagined her trying to keep her little one quiet, trying to cling to hope as day bleeds into day, uncertain how long she can keep him safe. She sees, in the context of so much fear, how beautiful and good her son is. The Midrash tells us that when he was born, the whole house filled with light. So she hides him from the danger of his world, hoping that somehow it will pass while they are safe inside. The verb vatitz penehu, and she hid him, has as its root tzadi pe nun, which means hidden, but also means north, and also means compass, and also is the part of the Passover Seder, tzafun, in which we seek out and find the hidden afikomen. The afikomen is, of course, the bread of affliction, which is also the bread of freedom, and which becomes the bread of our redemption. The afikomen represents the part of ourselves left behind in slavery, and finding it brings those lost parts back to ourselves. And at the Seder, it is the last thing we eat, just before Elijah comes with the promise of the Messianic age. So Yocheved uses this word to secure her child from the dangers of the world around him. Hidden within his hiding is affliction, slavery, true north, compass, direction, freedom, redemption. If you recall, the book of Exodus begins with a new Pharaoh rising to power who quickly sees the people of Israel as a threat, fearing that we, in our large and growing numbers, might side with an enemy nation in war. He puts us to ruthlessly oppressive labor and commands the midwives to kill the baby boys. Ramban, Nachmanides, Spanish rabbi of the 13th century, imagines that the new Pharaoh didn't want to attack the Israelites directly because it would create bad optics. Pharaoh and his advisors didn't want to kill them by sword, Ramban says, because it would be a great betrayal to harm a nation for nothing, who originally came to the land of Egypt by command of the first king. So according to Ramban, quote, everything was done with slyness so that Bnei Yisrael wouldn't recognize the government was targeting them. According to Exodus Rabbah, Pharaoh was particular only about the male children because his astrologers had told him that there was to be born a Hebrew woman, a son, to be born to a Hebrew woman, a son who would become their deliverer. So first he told the midwives to secretly kill the baby boys, and then when they performed civil disobedience and did not carry out his order, Ramban says, quote, the king commanded his whole nation, saying, every son who is born in the river you shall throw him. And the idea was that he did not wish to command his official royal executioners to kill them or to throw them in the river. Rather, Ramban continues, he instructed his nation that when they find a Hebrew boy, they should throw him in the river. And when the king unbridled the nation, Ramban says, the Egyptians would search the houses and would go there at night and find the young boys there. And regarding this, it was said, and she, Moshe's mom, was not able to hide him anymore. Velo yachla od hatzfino. When the Egyptians began to go from house to house in the night, searching for baby boys to kill, Yocheved couldn't hide Moses anymore. So she got a wicker basket and caulked it with bitumen and pitch and set it in the reeds by the banks of the Nile. And as we know, Miriam stationed herself to watch, and the current took the basket to Pharaoh's palace. And Pharaoh's daughter, Batya, found the baby and chose to raise him as her son. Thus, the story of the liberation of Am Yisrael began. But back to Yocheved's heart-stoppingly brave decision to come out of her house with her child. How did she muster that courage? On what basis did she make that choice? She must have determined that the risk of being attacked in the night when sleeping and defenseless and having her baby stolen from her was worse than sending him off and exposing him to a fate unknown. That the inside of her house had become as dangerous or more dangerous than the forces lurking outside. Now, it's a stretch to compare Yocheved's predicament to ours. But the aspect of her story that speaks to me this year is that turning point, when hiding inside was no longer safer than facing the danger she was hiding from. In some sense, it's easier to keep hiding when you're hiding, even if you start to suspect that it's not actually the safer thing. Because hiding is a natural response to fear. And because after 3 months or 20 months, there's inertia to hiding. There's habit in hiding. There may even be mild agoraphobia. It just starts to feel more comfortable to hide away from the world. This is a question many of us are starting to reflect upon. When is inside more dangerous than outside? When do the mental health effects of staying hidden away, the missed hugs, the lost community, the aloneness, the lack of fresh air, the physical stasis, outweigh the medical risks of exposure or infection? None of us can answer it for any other of us. But Omicron has raised for us the likely reality that we will not be 100% safe from COVID ever. Waiting for that time may be a mistake. Instead, not today, but when this spike passes, at some point, each of us may decide that walking into some measure of risk is better than staying hidden. Not to be reckless, but to be brave. For each of us, that time will be different. The risk we take will be different based upon our age and our condition and the treatments that are available to us. But this is, for most of us, what's next. coming out from hiding, from fear, from the now old familiar habit of indoor life into uncertainty, into an ever-changing risk landscape. Always reaching back to those who cannot come out to ensure that they remain connected and not alone, but reintegrating into connection and community, re-entering the big river of possibility where we don't know what will happen next, but we're going to push off from the reedy bank and take the ride. Shabbat Shalom.